Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Tom Shepard, and I'm a part of the Teach Now teaching certification program that started back in January, and I'm part of cohort number 3. This video and screencast will cover 4 main topics. First, I'd like to talk about just teacher planning and why it is so important and how that teacher planning can be reflected in the quality of the lesson. The second thing is going to be taking a look at some effective lessons that I found while studying here with Teach Now, and I'll also explain kind of why I found them to be effective. The third thing will be discussing effective formative assessments, and I'll also explain why I think those formative assessments are effective. And last but certainly not least will be just reflecting upon my own experience planning a unit for 8th grade math class and talking about some of those lessons plans that I have created in that unit plan. All right, so let's get started here. First, let's talk about teacher planning and why I think it's super important for teachers to be prepared with lesson and unit plan before walking into the classroom. First of all, I think an unprepared teacher runs the risk of having a lot of time wasted in class. The teacher probably didn't prepare anything in terms of differentiating instruction or creating formative assessments in their lesson plans. So it's pretty risky being unprepared and walking into a classroom, and especially in terms of classroom management and kind of correcting student misbehavior. So by having a teacher be prepared, they can be at the ready for student misbehavior. Things like differentiated instruction is planned out, and a map for formative assessments can help guide both the teacher and the students to make sure that they reach the desired learning objectives for that day or for that unit. Furthermore, we took a look at unpacking standards. In today's day and age, many schools adhere to some standards. For me, I'll be moving to Morocco and teaching at a private school in Casablanca called American Academy of Casablanca. And they adhere to the Common Core state standards set out by the USA. And when you read those Common Core state standards, unpacking them and deciphering what the verbs and the nouns mean are very important. And so that's part of teacher planning and making sure that from those standards, you can create some smart learning objectives. And so part of teacher planning and preparation will be looking at exactly what the goal is and keeping that goal in mind. Just like an athlete needs to keep in mind many things before they go out to the field, a teacher needs to keep in mind what exactly it is they're doing with the classroom to make sure that they're going to be achieving those goals. And so when a teacher keeps in mind all of those things and they're very well planned out, the class can run much more smoothly. Ultimately, students will be able to achieve those learning goals. And again, I think that's what defines success in the classroom. All right, let's take a look at some effective lesson plans. But first, I have a video for you guys. So let's go ahead and play that real quick.
Interactive,
Nice,
Caring, dedicated, enthusiastic, definitely,
talented,
concerned,
respectful,
likable and personable.
amazing,
cool. Good teachers are helpful, great.
All right, so there you saw in students' opinions of what makes a good teacher. And although a teacher can be excellent, really the lesson itself won't be effective with just a great teacher, with a great magician in front. So what really students need is an effective lesson plan. And I found one here in a 4th grade math class. And let's take a look at this video of an example of a good lesson.
4 times for each of those corners, and you came up with
8 thirds.
8/3. Okay. While students were reporting out their team strategies, I recognized that none of the solutions really got to the heart of this lesson. Tell me again, why did you multiply 2 times 4?
Because there's 4 corners on the square foot garden.
They weren't ready for the next step I had originally planned. In my mind, I'm scrambling, I'm trying to think How am I going to get this back on track and do what I need to? And that's where planning is so absolutely crucial.
I couldn't agree more with her there. Had she not had a backup plan, she would have continued to scramble. She would have had a classroom full of students, not really with any direction, and her lesson probably would have bombed. Let's take a look at what she did instead.
I had my plan D and I pulled out the teacher worked out strategies for them to take a look at. I provided them with some cards showing possible solutions, and I told them that these were teacher strategies they had used to solve the same problem. I love her thinking. She's saying we're only going to need to multiply the numerator. But why is that?
Because if you're not going to have to change the bottom because that's the whole, you only have that many. You can change the top because you can have as many as them as you need, but you have to keep the bottom the same because that's as many as in one whole.
The students did a great job.
All right, so what I really liked about this is that she was able to change directions. I think an effective lesson plan is one where a teacher has the ability to observe the students and receive some feedback from them. And if it's not working, they must have the ability to change. So I thought this lesson was really effective because she did try something else and it actually worked a lot better than her original plan. That kind of links back to just being planned and planning ahead. I think this lesson was also interesting, and her classroom is set up in a pretty collaborative way because her groups were communicating very well and each student was kind of describing their thinking. So it was very applicable and they were using their critical thinking skills to explain and properly communicate, which I think also is very, very effective. All right, let's switch gears here and start talking about formative assessments. Formative assessments are crucial to student learning and they should definitely be implemented into the classroom. Here, let's take a look at a YouTube video by Rick Wormelli, and he discusses what exactly formative assessments are. Let's take a look.
What about formative assessment? Well, of the two, teachers tend to spend the majority of their time designing their summative assessments, as if that was the most important aspect. But really, it's formative assessment. That's the most important aspect. It has the greatest impact on student achievement, on feedback to the teacher, everything. The whole enterprise of teaching and learning really boils down to that formative assessment. Can kids learn without grades? Yeah. Can they learn without formative assessment and the feedback that comes from it? Not at all. So we want to emphasize that. In fact, I would suggest that teachers spend at least the same amount of time, if not more, designing formative assessment instead of summative assessment. But what is this formative assessment? Well, formative assessment
So those are some great points by Rick, and basically I think formative assessments are effective if it's a two-way street. Teachers need to use them to receive feedback from students to make sure that they're understanding the material and to make sure they're on track to achieve those learning goals set out in the unit and in the lesson plans. But also students need to be using them because formative assessments are a way to achieve for student learning, meaning they're going to be learning things, they're going to be applying things, they're going to be using critical thinking skills and other 21st century skills during these formative assessments. So they're effective if the teacher's using them to gauge the learning and therefore can adjust, but they're not effective, these formative assessments, if there's no application or if there's no critical thinking. An example would just be, raise your hand if you agree that 4 plus 4 equals 8. And everyone says, yeah, well, I agree. Well, that's not very applicable or using critical thinking skills. So that would be an example of a not effective formative assessment. All right, last but not least, this is the fourth thing we'll talk about here. Let's move on to talking about my own experience planning a unit. So here you can see my unit plan itself. This was developed just about a week or two ago. And for this particular one, it's for an 8th grade math class. That's what I'll be teaching in Morocco here. It'll be my first time being a math teacher. So you can see 8th grade mathematics. Again, deriving from unpacking a standard and that activity we did, you can see the standard that I chose. It's dealing with constructing and interpreting scatter plots of bivariate measurement data. Bivariate measurement data is really just fancy language for something that has two measurements. You could correlate shoe size with height, for example. What I like about the Teach Now template for the unit plan is kind of like the vision for the unit, and it poses the question, what should learning look like? I really liked answering that question when planning the unit because it helps me keep on track. And if I scroll down towards the bottom here, you're going to see this section, which I think is extremely key, is that you can see the objectives. Now for this unit, I've got about 5 objectives. They basically correlate, so one objective is in one lesson plan. So this unit plan will probably be about 3 to 5 lessons deep. But basically, keeping the objectives as the primary focus is going to be key when planning a unit. And my own experience planning a unit, it all derived from kind of the learning goals. And I want to keep the learning goals and objectives as the central focus when planning a unit. And that way I can plan for differentiating instruction, I can integrate formative assessments, I can make sure students are developing 21st century skills, and I need to be observant and also receive that feedback from formative assessments and answering questions for students. The key is that I can therefore adapt my lessons and kind of change gears, just like in the video I showed you in 4th grade math class, where if something's not working, an effective teacher needs to go ahead and adjust. So overall, I thought the process of planning a unit based from the standards that we unpacked and the learning objectives, it was really, really helpful. And I always will be keeping the learning goals in mind and at the center focus when planning a unit. So that wraps it up. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.